Quick safety note. The following content is for educational and illustrative purposes regarding psychological adaptation and preparedness. Always follow local laws and official guidance. Week 11 is when a long disruption stops feeling like a disruption. Not because everything's fixed. Not because someone held a press conference and declared the crisis over. It's the opposite. It happens quietly, almost politely. Like the world is trying not to scare you while it teaches you a new normal. In the early weeks, everyone talks the same way. When will things reopen? When will services come back? When will life go back to how it was? By week 11, those questions start disappearing, and that's the real signal. Not because they were answered, but because people stop expecting an answer. You'll notice it in small conversations first. The tone changes. People stop describing what's happening as temporary. They stop speaking in until this passes language. They start speaking in, how do we live inside this language? That's a psychological line getting crossed. What used to feel like emergency behavior starts becoming routine behavior. People plan their day around restrictions the same way they plan around weather. They don't like it, they don't celebrate it, but they stop treating it as shocking. And once a behavior becomes routine, it becomes durable. This isn't weakness, it's human wiring. Adaptation is how people keep functioning when life becomes hard. The danger is that adaptation doesn't care whether the hardship is temporary or permanent. Once your brain adjusts its definition of normal, it takes real effort to reverse it. By week 10, the question in people's heads isn't, when will it end? It quietly becomes, how long is this going to last? And that one change affects everything. You'll also see it in public messaging. Early on, authorities lean on reassurance, not necessarily because they're lying, but because uncertainty is fuel on a fire. People tolerate hardship better when they believe there's an expiration date. Early on, authorities lean on reassurance, not necessarily because they're lying, but because uncertainty is fuel on a fire. People tolerate hardship better when they believe there's an expiration date. So early restrictions are framed as short-term. Curfews are precautionary, supply limits are brief, increased enforcement is temporary. But then, by week 10, the language shifts. Words like temporary and emergency fade out. Timelines stop being emphasized. The rules are still there, but they're no longer presented as extraordinary. They're presented like operating hours, like normal conditions. A curfew that felt outrageous at first becomes something families plan dinner around. Checkpoints become navigational details. Supply limitations stop causing daily anger and start shaping people's habits without them even noticing. No one votes on this transition. No one formally agrees to it. But behavior always tells the truth before policy does. One of the clearest signs that a crisis is settling into a long phase is what happens under the surface economically. One of the clearest signs that a crisis is settling into a long phase is what happens under the surface economically. Formal systems may still be open, but reliability starts slipping. Deliveries become inconsistent. Prices get jumpy. Certain items become conditional. Available today, gone tomorrow, back next week maybe. When predictability disappears, people start improvising. Quietly. They stop assuming stores will solve shortages. They start solving shortages through relationships. A neighbor with tools becomes valuable. Someone who can repair things becomes valuable. Someone who has steady access to a resource becomes valuable. This isn't movie-style black market drama. It's adaptive economics. It shows up in every society that goes through sustained disruption. Parallel systems emerge because people need stability, and they'll build it however they can. And once people start building workarounds instead of waiting for restoration, the relationship between citizens and institutions changes. Even if the official system still exists, trust quietly shifts, not into full rebellion, just into a new kind of cautious dependence. Another subtle change you'll see around week 10 is how authority shows up. Most modern societies don't flip into overt control overnight. It's not a single switch. It's layering. One measure gets added on top of another, then another. The combined weight reshapes what feels normal. Visibility increases, patrol patterns become consistent, infrastructure gets protected, enforcement becomes more preventative than reactive. And here's the weird part. People begin adjusting their behavior without even remembering making a decision to do it. Movement becomes more deliberate. Gatherings get smaller. Conversations get more careful. Not always out of fear. Sometimes it's just the understanding that the margin for unpredictability has narrowed. From a governance standpoint, this is stability. From a civilian standpoint, it can feel like pressure. But either way, it changes daily life. And once daily life changes long enough, it becomes the default. Information changes too. At the start of a disruption, information moves like a storm. Updates flood every channel. Experts argue publicly. Predictions collide with rumor. People consume endless content because they're trying to orient themselves. At the start of a disruption, information moves like a storm. Updates flood every channel. Experts argue publicly. Predictions collide with rumor. People consume endless content because they're trying to orient themselves. But sustained crisis demands a different communication strategy. By week 10, messaging often becomes calmer and more controlled. Updates get less granular. Language becomes more measured. Certainty is emphasized, even when conditions are still messy. That doesn't automatically mean deception. It reflects a priority. Too much alarming information destabilizes behavior. Too little creates rumor. So messaging often shifts toward reassurance, sometimes at the expense of detail. And when official information gets quieter, unofficial stories fill the gap. People rely more on small circles, family, friends, neighbors, group chats. That's rational. Humans have always filtered uncertainty through community, but it fragments reality. Two people on the same street can end up living inside two completely different perceptions of how stable things are. By week 10, the biggest shift isn't logistical, it's psychological. By week 10, the biggest shift isn't logistical, it's psychological. There comes a moment when people stop waiting for the old world to return and start building emotional scaffolding around the new one. Parents stop planning for when things go back and start planning for how to keep their kids steady inside the current conditions. Businesses stop waiting for restrictions to lift and redesign operations around constraints. Communities redefine what safety means. Individuals redefine what preparedness looks like. Hope doesn't disappear, it changes shape, it matures. Instead of hoping for reversal, people start hoping for manageability. And once a society crosses that threshold, returning to the previous baseline becomes much harder, even if conditions later improve. Because normal is no longer what existed before. Normal becomes what people have learned to function inside. Week 10 isn't the end of instability, and it isn't the beginning of recovery. It's the moment endurance thinking replaces emergency thinking. It's when a disrupted society starts reorganizing itself for the long haul. So what do you do with that? If you're the type who watches patterns, week 10 is not a cue for panic. It's a cue for awareness. If you're the type who watches patterns, week 10 is not a cue for panic. It's a cue for awareness. You don't need to spiral. You need to stay psychologically flexible. That means resisting denial without surrendering to fear. It means accepting reality without letting it turn you cynical or reckless. Practically, it means tightening your routines, not in a paranoid way, in a stabilizing way. Keep your sleep steady when you can. Keep your food and hydration boring and reliable. Keep moving, even if it's simple movement. Keep a few backup options for essentials, not because you're expecting disaster tomorrow, but because systems under strain are inconsistent. Practically, it means tightening your routines, not in a paranoid way, in a stabilizing way. And it means building relationships like they actually matter, because they do. When formal systems wobble, the most resilient households aren't the ones with the flashiest gear. They're the ones with trust networks, people they can check on, people they can coordinate with, people who can swap skills and help without turning every problem into an emergency. The last thing I'll say is this. Civilizations rarely change in one dramatic moment. More often, they transition quietly, unevenly, and without universal acknowledgement. People will adapt, they always do. The real question is whether you recognize the shift while it's happening, or whether you only notice it once the world around you has already reorganized itself. And if you can recognize it, you can make better choices, calmer choices, earlier choices, not fear choices. Just the kind that keep you steady while everything else is trying to rewrite the rules. This video is intended for informational purposes only. The ideas presented are observations on psychological and societal trends during disruptions and do not constitute professional, legal, or safety advice. Always rely on local emergency services and official government updates during a crisis. Be sure to subscribe and like for more insights.